Hello, my lovely law enthusiast humans. I am going to be doing the summary. We are several days behind, but I am catching up with us today so that we are on par for Monday. So what we have is day 26 going on. In the end of day 25 of the Karen Reed retrial, and by the way, I don't have any professional experience in anything. I am an outside juror and observer giving a summary, and I will link below for you to watch the things below. And in the end of day 25, we had Dr. Russel, the dog bite expert, explaining her credentials and the dog bite wounds, etc. And then we go into day 26. And in day 26, we continue with the cross-examination of Dr. Russel. And she was very thorough. Brennan tried to poke points about the puncture wounds not being depthful, and she was explaining the different, and he said, well, you don't have these things listed. She goes, they're listed in this other thing that I referenced. She goes, every single dog bite, every single dog attack is not going to be identical. She goes, there are patterns that are similar and things that you look for. There are distinct patterns that happen over and over and over. She goes, they're not going to be, it's not a perfect checklist of, okay, this is there, this is there, this is there. It's, here are the things that you look for, and so she's like, here's a set of things that you look for that are consistent with dog bite wounds, etc. And she goes, it doesn't have to mark the list of it has to have all of these things. It's if it has more of these things, then it's going to be akin to a dog bite attack or a dog attack. And she goes, and it's very impossible because claws, she said, people think that teeth are sharper than claws, and that's not true. She goes, for instance, if you look at birds, they have talons. And she goes, and canine claws are, they are meant to hurt. They are meant for tough digging, for climbing. They can do damage to you, damage to skin. They can penetrate skin, and you're not going to have the depth of, say, a canine puncture bite. And she goes, and every time you have a dog bite wound, those really sharp, deep, long canines don't always make contact. And so she was explaining that stuff. And then when she was asked about how she felt about Karen Reed's statements and everything, she mentioned grief. And it was like, yeah, but she's going through something. She just found her loved one. It makes perfect sense that she was freaking out and just saying things. And she's a medical doctor who's worked in the ER and worked in other hospital settings. So she very well understands when people are going through stuff, the different ways that they can come out, the freakouts and spiraling that happen. And she said, I dismissed all of that stuff because the defendant was going through grief. So therefore, they don't have any bearing on the lacerations occurring or not occurring. They're there. Brennan goes a really interesting route. He starts asking her about the tested dog DNA and how dog DNA was not found. He said, did you know that dog DNA was not found on the swabs taken from John O'Keefe's sweater? The defense asked for a mistrial with prejudice. Now, normally we would not want to try to go for a mistrial because this is the second trial. It's very expensive for everybody. It's time consuming for everybody. A mistrial would mean everything starts again, except that a mistrial with prejudice means, yes, we're throwing this case out because something that cannot be undone, that justice cannot be done because of the offense done by the opposing counsel, but we want it done with prejudice, which means she can't be tried again for this. This is too much. This is too far. She could never get a fair trial after this. So and that's what happened with Alec Baldwin. The judge had found that there were too many errors with the prosecution, and it went way too far. And so he got his trial. It was a mistrial. So the original case was dismissed with prejudice. so he cannot be charged again. And that's what the defense was going for here, because dog DNA and the DNA evidence from dog swiping was not brought into evidence. That none of the other experts, none of the DNA experts, none of the processors from the forensics teams, none of them had been asked about by either side about dog DNA. So for him to ask this expert about dog DNA and bring up information that was not presented as evidence to the jury was abhorrent to the defense. And I also want to point out the jury would not know this because, again, this stuff was not brought up, but that the DNA, when it was swabbed, it was only on the front, the top of John O'Keefe's shirt, and only in a couple spots. John O'Keefe's actual arm, the actual wounds that were on his right arm, were not swabbed. The inside of the hoodie sleeve was not tested. And when that was brought up, not only did the judge deny that motion, I think it's because she's like, you already said you didn't have a lot of days in this, we're this close, and you want to have a mistrial with prejudice? Not on that, sir, not on that. She didn't use those exact words. But that is what she let go of. And when she was allowed to be continued to ask about the dog DNA, she said not finding dog DNA on a hoodie doesn't matter. She goes, I did see those results that said that they did not find it, but that doesn't mean that an attack didn't happen, because canine DNA is actually apparently notoriously difficult to detect to begin with. Like, even if you have a fresh attack on a wound, saliva from the dog doesn't always resonate with testing. And that because the clothes that were tested and nothing else, not even the skin, but the clothes that were tested, she goes, there's a lot of neutralizing that had already happened and a lot of things that could displace the tests anyway, because there were sterilized scissors used to cut it off. There were people grabbing at it. He was left in the snow overnight for hours. That can neutralize the DNA testing evidence for animals, because, they're not trying to find each other like that in the woods. And so the fact that for however long after the incident may have happened, he was left covered in the snow, and then it was unfrozen, it was cut with scissors, people were touching it and grabbing at it, and then they were thrown onto an ambulance floor, they were thrown onto a hospital floor. And she goes, so there's all kinds of muddied up stuff that happened. So that doesn't change the pattern recognition and the identity of the lacerations on John O'Keefe's arm. And she goes, so that's not finding dog DNA isn't actually a big deal or a big detail. So that is what happened on day 26. We also had on day 26, after lunch, we had another tech expert who was explaining the difference between whether the taillight was cracked or broken, because everyone was saying that because multiple people had said there were pieces of her taillight missing before they found John. And shortly after they found John. There's pictures, I'll put one up here, from when the police had sent a care check on the children at John O'Keefe's house later that day. And there was dash cam footage of him pulling up into one Meadows, and Karen Reed's SUV was parked there before it was detained. And there was this debate of with the plow truck driver of him being able to see it. And then that's going to lead us into day 27. I'll make a separate video about that, keep these ones a little shorter. So I will see you in the next video. What do you think about the dog DNA dismissal? Where is it okay that the prosecution tried to bring in evidence that was not previously presented to try to knock this expert back? It didn't work for the judge.